So today we're jumping into a huge question from the ancient world. It's one thing to build an empire, but it's a whole different ballgame to actually keep it running. How do you control all that land and all those people for like centuries? Do you use an iron fist, or do you try a gentler approach? Let's dig in and look at two ancient empires that had two totally different answers.
Right, this is the big problem, isn't it? Winning a battle, that's a quick victory. But actually governing, making sure things are stable, stopping people from constantly rebelling, that's the real challenge. And in the ancient Middle East, two super powerful empires came up with two very, very different solutions to this exact problem.
Okay, before we go any further, let's just make sure we're on the same page. What even is an empire? Well, put simply, it's a huge area of land, usually with lots of different groups of people living in it, all ruled by one person or one government. It's all about having one central power controlling a massive territory. All right, got it? Good. Let's meet our first contender. First up, we've got the Assyrians. So between roughly 900 and 700 BC, they built this massive empire in Mesopotamia. And their strategy for holding it all together? It was simple, really. Fear. Their whole goal was to be so terrifying that nobody would even think about messing with them.
And this carving here, man, this says it all. This is one of their great kings, Ashurbanipal. And notice, he's not sitting on some fancy throne making laws. Nope, he's on a war chariot, bow in hand, ready to go. The Assyrians built their empire on pure military power, and trust me, they were experts at war.
So what made them so good at it? What was their edge? Well, it pretty much came down to this one thing: iron. See, the Assyrians were one of the first big powers to really figure out how to work with iron. So while all their enemies were still fighting with softer bronze weapons, the Assyrians showed up with harder, stronger iron. That was a huge game changer on the battlefield.
And they didn't just have better weapons. They had a terrifyingly efficient system. They had a playbook for taking down a city. First, a storm of iron-tipped arrows to soften everybody up. Then, bam! A massive charge of chariots and cavalry to just shatter the enemy lines. And finally, the soldiers would move in with battering rams and ladders to finish the job. It was organized, it was brutal, and it worked.
So, what if you lost a fight to the Assyrians? Well, it wasn't good. They weren't trying to win any popularity contests. They made sure everyone knew what would happen if you resisted. Survivors, they became slaves. They'd force whole communities to move hundreds of miles away from their homes just to break them apart. They'd take everything of value and then just burn the city to the ground. The message was crystal clear: cross us and we will destroy you. This was controlled by pure, absolute terror.
But here's the thing. That wasn't the only way to run an empire. Next up, we're going to see how a whole other power rose up with a completely different idea. Let's talk about the Persians.
Just look at the difference here. On the left, you've got the Assyrian Empire. Pretty big, right? But now look at the Persian Empire on the right. Whoa, it is enormous. We're talking from Egypt all the way over to India. Getting all that land is one thing, but to hold that together, yeah, you're going to need a new strategy.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. The Persian way was the exact opposite of the Assyrian way. Instead of burning cities, they left them alone. Instead of demanding massive payments that would bankrupt people, they just asked for small, reasonable taxes. They didn't move people around. Instead, they let them keep their own local laws, their own languages, even their own religions. It was a strategy based on tolerance, on practicality, on making people actually okay with being part of your empire instead of just scaring them into submission.
Now, being tolerant is a great idea, but how do you actually run an empire that big? I mean, logistically. Well, the Persians were amazing administrators, and it all starts with this number: 1,600 miles. That was the length of the Royal Road. Think of it like the interstate highway system of the ancient world. It connected their whole massive empire. A message that used to take 3 months to get from one end to the other could now get there in about a week. This was an absolute game changer. It let them govern, move armies, and encourage trade. It was about connecting people, not just conquering them.
So there you have it. Two totally different models for running an empire. You've got the Assyrian way, ruled by fear, and the Persian way, ruled by fairness and good management. So that brings us to the big question. Which one actually lasts? Which one works in the long run?
Well, the verdict on the Assyrian method is pretty clear. You just can't rule an empire that big through fear forever. Being that cruel creates a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, and, eventually, the people they had conquered just got sick of it. They rose up and rebelled.
And this quote, wow, It just says everything. When the Assyrian capital Nineveh finally fell, people across the entire empire celebrated. They weren't sad their rulers were gone. They were thrilled. It just goes to show you how unstable ruling by fear really is. It might work for a while, but it creates a kind of hatred that's just waiting for its moment.
Which brings it all back to this timeless question. When it comes to holding on to power long term, what's the better bet? Fear or fairness? What do you think?